Welcome back to the fourth and possibly the final installment of the second Animorphs book, Animorphs number 2, The Visitor. I don't know if I will be able to get through the rest of this near the hour mark, but possibly. Oh, hello. I am happy to hear that you've got a new job lined up, but sad to hear that you have to wake up so early in the morning that 8 o'clock in the evening is feeling late for you. That sounds like a lot. Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, I mean, at least if you're done at 3 o'clock, then, you've still got, well, I guess, like, 5 or 6 more hours of daylight to enjoy at this time of the year. All right. Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Where we left off, Rachel was making a pitch for returning to the Chapman house, because they've been following their vice principal, Mr. Chapman, because they know he's a controller in a position of some authority. And on her first excursion into the Chapman house, she discovered that Mr. Chapman, who is actually the Yeerk Innis 226, does have something of a direct line to Visser 3, who is the authority figure who's been put in charge of the invasion of planet Earth. And since they know that he's in contact with the Visser, Rachel was making a pitch for going back in to try to gain more information. Chapter 16. It was a dark and stormy night. Sorry. I've always wanted to write that, but it really was a dark and stormy night. Where's Jake? I asked as we all got together down the street from Chapman's house. Everyone else was there. Cassie and Marco were wearing raincoats, although it hadn't started raining yet. Tobias was overhead, trying to hold on to a branch in a tree while the wind tried to knock him off it. Jake had to stay home, Marco said. Something about his dad grounding him. Why would his dad ground him? How do I know? Marco said, sounding grouchy. You know how parents are. Don't ask me to explain them. I bit my lip. Somehow I felt more nervous with Jake being absent. The crazy wind whistling through the branches wasn't helping my confidence either. I've spotted Fluffer, Tobias said, so all could hear. He's kind of torturing a little rat he's found, but at least it's not a shrew. Look, I'm not a big fan of shrews just because I was one. I took a deep breath. Okay, look, we can't always count on all of us being together, I guess. So we go without Jake. I glanced at Cassie. She smiled blandly. Something was going on with her, but I didn't have time to find out what. I'll scope the area, Tobias volunteered. He opened his wings a little and was immediately propelled out of the tree by the wind. I watched as he rode it expertly, swooping quickly up into the air and beyond the range of my weak human eyes. After a while, we saw something shooting over our heads at about 50 miles an hour. All clear, Tobias called down as he shot past. I felt strange, a little nauseous, a little scared. Everything seemed strange tonight. The weird thing was, I knew I'd feel better as soon as I morphed. I concentrated. The first raindrop fell just as I felt my tail grow out behind me. By the time I had fallen to the ground, surrounded by the tent of my clothing, the rain had started for real. Oh, perfect, Marco said. This just gets more and more fun. At least you have a raincoat, I said. I have nothing but fur, and this rain makes it impossible to smell anything out here. Cassie squatted next to me. She's just a normal-sized girl, but when you're a 10-pound cat, any human looks like Godzilla. Be careful, Rachel, Cassie said, and then she stroked my back. I started to move away, but she kept her hand on my back for a few seconds. Then, smiling mysteriously, she stood up. I found I soon lost interest in Cassie's expression. Cats really don't have much interest in humans at all, unless food is involved. I'm out of here, I said. I took off at a medium run. Cats don't like rain. I could feel the cat brain's distaste. I'd always thought cats hated all water, but that wasn't Fluffer's attitude. See, to him it was all about the smells and the sounds. Rain washes away sense. Without sense, a cat feels cut off and lost. Almost as bad as losing smells is the fact that rain plopping all around you makes it hard to listen for the important sounds. The tiny, high-pitched squeaks and the little furtive scritching noises. Rain to cats is a lot like being in the dark is to human beings. It just makes the whole world kind of boring. So I ran toward the kitty door. Not drawer. Actually looking forward to the friendly smells and sounds of home. At least, that's what Fluffer was thinking. I was still wondering why Jake hadn't come. And I was wondering if it was some kind of bad omen. There's a bad feeling over this whole mission. I knew my way around the Chapman house, both as a cat and as a human. And I was pretty sure I knew the routine. Last time Visser 3 had made contact right at 8 o'clock. If Visser 3 communicated with Chapman at the same time every night, then I had arrived right on schedule. Chapman was sitting on the couch, same as last time, and just as I'd hoped, at 3 minutes until 8, he stood up and headed down toward the basement. My whole plan was to go down there with him. I remembered the layout of the little secret room. I remembered the desk. I knew if I could somehow follow him down without him seeing me and then get under the desk, I would be invisible to both him and to the Visser 3 hologram. The problem was that the whole plan counted on Chapman not noticing me. He headed for the basement door. I fell into step right behind him. The trick was to stay just inches behind his feet. From there, he couldn't see me, but I had to watch his feet closely. If he hesitated, I could plow right into him. That would be a very uncat-like thing to do. He walked, I kept pace perfectly, just behind. He headed down the stairs. I figured this part would be easier. When people walk downstairs, they usually look where they're going. They don't turn around and look behind them. But one sound, one clumsy move, and I was finished. We reached the bottom of the stairs. Suddenly, Chapman stopped dead. I leapt behind the couch. He looked around like he'd heard a noise, or maybe he just sensed something. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. He started on toward the door. I fell into step behind him again. So, what's happening? I nearly had a heart attack. My tail puffed up. My back fur went straight up. I almost bolted. Chapman stopped, and I nearly got entangled in his legs. Chapman stopped, and I nearly got entangled in his legs. His left foot moved. I dodged. He backed up a little. I squirmed out of the way. It's me, Jake. What's going on, Rachel? Jake? Chapman opened the Chapman opened the door of the secret room. He stepped through. I was right between his monstrously big feet. If he happened to glance down, but he didn't. He didn't, and when he turned around to shut the door behind him, I bolted for the desk. I jammed my body as far back into the dark corner as I could. I'd made it. Barely. I was alive. So far. Rachel, can you hear me? Jake, where are you? You scared me half to death. Are we okay? He sounded concerned. Me? I was just very angry. What do you mean, are we okay? I yelled silently. Where are you? Well, I'm kind of on you. On me? Jake, this is not the time to be playing jokes. Chapman sat down at the desk. His feet pushed beneath the desk, just narrowly missing me as I once again dodged nimbly out of the way. Sorry, I can't exactly see. I kept my eyes focused on Chapman's feet. Cats have incredible powers of concentration. I focused hard on those big feet, each almost as big as I was. I had to stay out of their way. That was the key to staying alive. Jake, we're in kind of a situation here. In like 10 words or less, where are you? In 10 words or less? I morphed, Jake said. I'm a flea. Chapter 17. Excuse me? It would have been funny if I hadn't been so terrified. Are you telling me you morphed into a flea? A flea? Yeah, I'm on your back, or your head. I can't tell. I don't really have eyes. At least, not eyes that can see anything I can understand. I mean, all I know is warm or not warm. I think I can sense blood. That's about it. And I can kind of sense motion. Like when your hair stood up. I knew there was something going on around me. Jake, this is sick. This is beyond sick. What is the matter with you? A flea? Are you insane? Just being a lizard made you sick. This is way worse. Actually, it's kind of okay, he said. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but the flea mind is so limited, it's not hard at all to control. All it knows is to move all it knows is to move toward the sense of warm blood and eat. It's like, I don't know, like in a way, I'm not even really in the flea. I'm not even really in the flea because I can't see much or sense much. I expected it to be horrible. But when Cassie and Marco and I tested it out, they're in on this with you. Of course. That's why Cassie had made such a point of patting my head. She was depositing Jake on me. Rachel, we were worried about you. We figured someone should go along with you. And Tobias said, so Tobias is in on this too. Tobias said you weren't telling us everything. He wasn't sure why or what it was you weren't telling. I sighed inwardly. I guess it is good to have friends who care about you. But on the other hand, Jake had practically made me run into Chapman. Besides, the idea of Jake morphing into a flea and crawling around in my fur just gave me the worst creeps you could imagine. Suddenly, the brilliant light went on. Visser 3 appeared in the room. Jake, the Visser is here in hologram. Yes, I think sick was a negative in 1996. Jake, the Visser is here in hologram form, so don't distract me, okay? We're hiding under the desk, about half an inch away from Chapman's feet. Oh, but it doesn't matter if he sees you, right? I mean, he'll just figure you're the cat. No biggie, so you shouldn't be acting suspicious. I hesitated. Oh, well, it would have come out sooner or later. Jake, that thing I didn't tell you, it's that Visser 3 saw me in here last time. He told Chapman he should, probably just, kill me. He was worried I might be an Andalite-morph. For a while, Jake didn't say anything. I had the feeling he was trying to keep himself from yelling at me. He failed. Rachel, are you crazy? You came back down here after that? Are you insane? But just then, Chapman began to speak. Welcome, Visser. Innis 226 of the Saltniar pool submits to you. May the Kandrona shine and strengthen you. And you, Visser 3 said curtly, report. I have 4 new voluntary hosts, Visser, Chapman said. 2 are children recruited through the sharing, the front organization. Of the 2 adults, 1 is an agent for the FBI, a sort of policeman. He may be very fool. Visser 3's artificial voice was flat, but still carried a load of anger. Do I care about a handful of hosts? What have you learned about the Andalite bandits? Visser, what can I do unless they show themselves? They used Earth animals in the attack on the pool, Visser 3 said. They used powerful, dangerous Earth animals. Find out how they obtain such morphs. My experts here tell me such animals are rare on this part of the planet. Yes, Visser, I will do. Yes, you will. And we have another matter. We need 6 more human controllers suitable for work as guards. They will be used to increase guard around the Kandrona. What's happening? Jake asked. Chapman is getting reamed by Visser 3. Too bad Marco isn't here. He'd enjoy seeing Chapman get chewed out. He wants us bad, I said. Or at least he wants the Andalites he thinks we are. He's putting extra guards around the Kandrona, human controllers. That's interesting. Maybe he'll... The foot moved too quickly. The point of the shoe hit me in the ribs. Chapman pushed back from the desk. He passed right through the Visser 3 hologram. For a second, I saw them united as if they were one horrible creature. What's happening? Visser 3 demanded. Chapman stared at me, horror and fury in his eyes. I flattened my ears back against my skull. My claws came out. My teeth were bared. It's the animal, Visser, the cat, Chapman said in a voice full of loathing and fear. Visser 3 seemed to make a seething, half-hissing noise. You should have killed it when I told you to, Innis 226. But Visser, Chapman protested. And yet it all works out in my advantage, Visser 3 said. Now there can be no doubt that this cat is one of the Andalite bandits. Jake, we're busted, I said. We're busted really bad. We will no longer have to search for the Andalites, Visser 3 said. We have one right here with us. Shall I kill it? Chapman asked. No, don't kill it. Seize it. Seize it now, before it can morph back into Andalite form. By the time I am done with this one, we will have them all. It has been a long time since I tortured a proud Andalite warrior, but I know now how to break them. Seize it and bring it to me. Chapman knew better than to argue. Well, it feels like it's been a long time since he tortured an Andalite warrior, but I think in book terms, it's been like 3 weeks, maybe a month. I guess that's a long time for Visser 3. Chapter 18. Chapman dived. His hands were open wide, grabbing for me. I was trapped. No way out. No way to open that door and escape. Trapped! No sensible choice but to surrender. But the cat and I were in agreement on this. You never surrender. I felt my claws extend. My pupils were wide, ready to see every tiny movement. My ears were flattened back against my skull. My needle-sharp teeth were bared. My liquid steel muscles were coiled. Chapman's Chapman's hand seemed to slow down. It was like he was moving in slow motion. Everything seemed slower to my heightened cat senses. Only I was moving at normal speed. My paw lashed out, my claws bit flesh. I saw 3 bright red tracks on the back of Chapman's hand. I could smell the blood that flowed. Ah! Chapman howled. He backed away. Get it! Visser 3 shouted. What's going on? Jake wondered. I feel like we're bouncing around a lot. Chapman got a determined look on his face. He came at me again. I was cornered. No way out. I slashed. Chapman cried out. My claws were lacerating him, tearing furrows in his arms and hands. He grabbed me around the middle. The cat in me hated being grabbed that way. Hated it a lot. I brought my teeth into it. I was a 10-pound bundle of lightning-fast claws and teeth. Chapman's hands looked like raw hamburger. A magnificent animal, Visser 3 commented. Twist it around. Hold it with your forearm. That's right. I did a lot of damage. Believe me, Chapman got hurt. But in the end, no matter how tough I was just 10 pounds of killer. Chapman was about 18 times bigger. He got his forearm around my chest. He had me pressed back against his chest. My front legs were pinned. With his other arm, he managed to grab my hind legs. All I could do was bite. I bit. I bit again and again. But although I could hurt him, I couldn't kill him. I couldn't stop him. His fear of Visser 3 was greater than his fear of any pain I was causing. Bring it to me, Visser 3 said enthusiastically. Bring it to me. I will come to collect it at the nearest landing site. Visser, what if it resumes its Andalite shape? You have weapons. If it tries to remorph, then kill it. Yes. Rotten little beast. Yes, Visser, I will go directly. We will deal with this Andalite bandit. And bring the girl, too. The girl? Melissa? Chapman asked. I have been indulgent too long. This Andalite spy has penetrated your home. It is because of the girl. I have been indulgent too long. This Andalite spy has penetrated your home, and it is because of the girl. I have already chosen the yurt for her. Bring her with the Andalite. Obey me, Innis 226, or prepare to face the Vanarts. Visser 3's hologram disappeared. Chapman suddenly threw me across the room. I twisted in midair and brought my legs around for the landing. I hit the floor and skidded. Okay, something is definitely going on out there. By the time I was up, okay, something is definitely going on out there, Jake said. By the time I was up, Chapman had reached his desk and opened a drawer. His bloody hand came out with a small pistol-like device. I had seen them before. It was a handheld Dracon beam. Chapman leveled the weapon at me. He was shaking. His face seemed to be twitching. The weapon jerked a little with each spasm. But I knew he would still have gotten me if I had tried to move. Are you going to tell me what's going on? Jake demanded. A few seconds ago, I felt another warm body close by, and I think I'm sensing blood. We're in kind of a mess, I said. What kind of a mess? Jake asked. Chapman has a Dracon beam pointed at me. He knows I'm not exactly a cat. He thinks I'm an Andalite. He's taken me to Visser 3. Oh, this is bad. It gets worse. Visser 3 wants Melissa too. Chapman opened the door a crack. Get down here, now, he yelled upstairs. I guess he saw my eyes flick toward the door. He made a fierce, vicious grin. Try it, Andalite. Go ahead and try it. I'd love the excuse to fry you. I decided not to head for the door. You've made life very difficult for me, Chapman said. Very difficult. If I have to let Visser 3 take the girl, if I have to let Visser 3 take the girl, my host will make life annoying for me. Do you know how tiring it is to have an uncooperative host? No, of course you don't. But trust me, Andalite, I will gladly kill you. Mrs. Chapman appeared at the door. What is it? This cat is one of the Andalite bandits in a morph. Visser 3 wants him. Get me the cage we used to take him to the vet. Mrs. Chapman nodded and disappeared. What's going on now? Jake asked. Miss Chapman is getting a cage, I said. I was feeling utterly defeated. Because of me, the Yeerks were going to take Melissa. I had failed. I had made a mess of things. Miss Chapman brought the cage. She opened the little barred door. In, Chapman snapped. I didn't move. In, he said in a cruel whisper, or I'll finish you right here. He looked like he meant it. I walked into the cage. Miss Chapman closed the door and made sure it was locked. Chapman snatched up the cage and carried me to the top of the stairs. Now, he snapped at his wife. Go get... Peering through the slats in the side of the cage, I saw him stagger. His face was twitching like... I am not going to read that line. Okay, sorry. His face was twitching, and he seemed to be having a hard time getting control of his mouth. Go get the girl, he said through gritted teeth. Miss Chapman started to obey, but then Chapman cried out, He fell to his knees. He is fighting me. Post-rebellion, Miss Chapman muttered under her breath. She seemed horrified and fascinated all at once. Oh. Sorry, that should have been, Post-rebellion, Miss Chapman muttered under her breath. She seemed horrified and fascinated all at once. And then, suddenly, her left hand slapped her own face. Ah! Mine too! Stop it, Chapman, Chapman said. Stop it, or I'll break you. I'll leave you nothing but a shell. You cannot win. No host has ever succeeded in rebelling. But the Chapman host wasn't giving up. It was terrible. Terrible in a way that made you want to watch. To anyone else, it would have just looked as if our assistant principal and his wife were nuts. Chapman was talking to himself and twitching and contorting, still unable to get to his feet. The hosts are fighting the Yeerks, I told Jake. The human brains are resisting. Chapman is out of control. Miss Chapman is trying to choke herself with her own hand. The Yeerk is trying to regain control. It's incredible. I can't believe it. I can't believe the host can fight back this hard. It's because of Melissa. They're fighting for their daughter. Chapman cried. Suddenly he lurched to his feet. I will win, Chapman. You cannot resist. And it was true. The Chapman host was losing. Innis 226 was regaining control. The same was happening with Miss Chapman. The Yeerk in her head was forcing the rebellious hand away from her throat. But neither of the Chapmans looked good. They're exhausted, I reported to Jake. They're regaining control, but they're both a mess. Sweating, pale, still trembling and jerking. Chapman looked at his wife, or at least the yerk slug in Chapman's brain ordered his eyes to look toward a body that was controlled by a different yerk. It was harder now to think of Chapman as just being Chapman. I had seen proof that there were two creatures inside him. I even knew what that was like. There were two people in my head as well. I had fought to control the brain of the shrew, just as the Chapman yerk now fought to control Chapman's brain. Chapman said, "I have control again." Miss Chapman nodded. "Yes, but just barely. They fight fiercely for their children, these humans. And they will not stop fighting. I can't maintain my cover with this host waiting to attack at every opportunity. I have to be at the school every day." Sorry. "The host is beaten and exhausted for now, but in a few days, he'll just strike again." Chapman sounded angry and frustrated. He's not a fool. He knows he can't win. He even knows that each battle will leave him weaker and that eventually I will triumph. Miss Chapman kicked my cage like it was all my fault. He doesn't have to win. All he has to do is wait until you're in a meeting with parents or members of the school board, then strike. They'll think you've lost your mind. Chapman looked haunted. He checked his watch. "I'll take the Andalite to Visser 3. Maybe I can make him understand." "Go, quickly," Miss Chapman told her husband. Chapman snatched up the cage I was in. He barreled through the door. He slammed me into the door jamb on the way. Daddy, what are you doing?" It was Melissa. She was across the living room. I hadn't seen her arrive. Where had she been? I could only pray that she had not heard everything. If she'd heard it all, there was no hope for her. Chapman kept walking out into the wet night. "Daddy, do you have Fluffer in there?" "It's Melissa," I told Jake. "If she doesn't back off, she's going to force them to take her." "Daddy?" Melissa sounded frightened now. She came running. Chapman moved quicker. Chapman moved quicker because the real Chapman was helping. He knew his daughter would only make things worse if she tried to intervene. "Fluffer!" Melissa cried. There was only one hope. "Tobias?" I cried out, making my thought speech as loud as I could. "Tobias, can you hear me?" His answer was faint, but it was Tobias. "Yes, Rachel." "The real Fluffer! We need him! We need him right now!" "Rachel, what is going on out there?" Jake demanded. "Fluffer? Why are you taking Fluffer? Daddy, stop!" Chapter 19. Out the front door we went, out into the night, Melissa sobbing pitifully. Jake demanding to know what was happening, Chapman walking as fast as he could. Melissa grabbed her father's arm. The cage wobbled wildly. "Daddy, you can't take Fluffer. Don't take him away. What are you doing?" The car, I could see it in the driveway. We were almost there. Suddenly, I heard a yowling, yammering, high-pitched sound that started as a hiss and ended as a shriek. Like a bullet he came, racing across the lawn. The real Fluffer. He He was running like every monster in the world was right behind him. In the darkness, the humans couldn't see what was scaring Fluffer so badly, but with my cat eyes, I could see perfectly. Just a few feet off the ground, like some dark shadow of death, came Tobias. Fluffer must have recognized his cage. He must have figured that if he just got inside, he'd be safe from the talons of the raptor that pursued him. Fluffer leapt toward the cage. He glommed onto it and tried to dig his claws into the plastic. For one frozen instant, Fluffer McKitty saw something he never expected to see. Fluffer saw himself. It was almost as weird for me. The cat in my head was totally baffled. This new cat smelled exactly like himself. This did not make any sense at all. It meant nothing. It wasn't even a part of any cat reality. The human part of me noticed a small cut on Fluffer's head. Tobias had taken a good swipe at him to get him moving in the right direction. "Fluffer?" Melissa said. But she tried to peer inside the cage. Chapman was quick. "No, sweetheart," he said. This isn't Fluffer. It's some other cat that sneaked into the basement. He's different. I'm taking him to the shelter so his owners can pick him up." "But why didn't you just tell me that?" Chapman looked confused. I didn't notice you there." Melissa stepped back like she'd been slapped. "But Daddy, I was crying." "Sorry," Chapman shrugged. He shoved the cage into the back seat. We drove off. I breathed a sigh of relief. I knew Melissa wasn't safe yet, but she was safe for now, at least. "Good work, Tobias," I said, but I don't think he could hear me. And I couldn't see out of the windows, so I didn't know if he or Marco or Cassie were anywhere close. "Jake, you still with me?" "Yes. Do you have a minute to fill me in?" "This flea existence is fine for hiding, but I can't tell anything about what's going on. I'm in a cat carrier. Chapman's in the front seat. He watches me through the rearview mirror. He still has the Dracon beam. I think maybe I'm in pretty big trouble here." "We're not beaten yet," Jake said. "Jake, time must be getting short. It's been at least an hour. You must have morphed before me. You need to get away and morph back." "We still have time," Jake said. "You have a watch, Jake?" I asked. "I don't think so." "You're what, about twice?" "You have a watch, Jake?" I asked. "I don't think so. You're what, about twice the size of a period on a book page? You can't risk being trapped in a flea morph. Besides, there's nothing you can do." We hadn't traveled far before the car started bouncing and rattling over a rough road. "As soon as we get outside again, you need to jump off, Jake," I said. "Just make yourself jump away from warmth and away from the smell of blood. You can do that." The car came to a stop. "Rachel, there is no way I'm going to leave you alone." I knew he was trying to be brave, but he was also making me mad. "Jake, we're trapped. He's got a Dracon beam on me, and I'm in a cage. Visser 3 is coming to get me. I can't morph back, or they'll see I'm human. Chapman will recognize me." "How long do you think it will take for him to figure out who the rest of us are? It would be the end of us all, the end of the Animorphs, the end of the only hope for stopping these guys. Come on, Jake. You know it's true." "We're not beaten yet," Jake repeated stubbornly. The only hope is for me to stay in Catmorph," I said. "They'll probably, but at least they'll never find out about the rest of you. Now jump off me." Chapman got out of the car. He came around and opened the back door. Time to meet the Visser, Andalite. He'll have a wonderful time with you. Chapman lifted me out of the back seat. I looked out through the bars. We're at the construction site, I told Jake. Get off me. I'm not. I couldn't argue with Jake anymore. I was afraid now. Afraid. I could picture what Visser 3 might do to me. Sorry, Jake, but this time I'm the boss, I said. I cocked my rear leg and started scratching in that rapid cat-like way. What are you doing? I'm scratching. I want you off of me. Okay, Jake said. Just stop it. It's like an earthquake here. Okay, Rachel, you're right. We've lost this battle. Chapman carried the cage into the construction site. I could see the ground go by beneath me. I could see through the bars, all of the half-built cinder block buildings. I could see the very spot where the 5 of us had cowered in terror while Visser 3 had morphed into a monster and swallowed the Andalite prince. The Andalite's last despairing cry came back to me. He had lost his fight. Now I was losing mine. Maybe there was no hope. Maybe we were fools to even try to resist the Yeerks. Get out of here, Jake, I said. Okay, Rachel. Here I go. Look, be strong, Rachel. Yeah, Jake, you too. Jumping. A few seconds later, Chapman put me down on the ground. He waited beside the cage. The 2 of us stared off into the darkness. I decided to make sure Jake was gone. Jake? Jake? No answer. Jake? Answer me. I've changed my mind. I want you to stay with me. If he had lied to me, he would answer now. Come on, Jake. I've changed my mind. I need you. No answer. He was truly gone. That fact filled me with grim satisfaction. If Jake and the others survived, there would still be some hope. But the feeling of loneliness was awful. Then I heard the sound of something large moving swiftly in the air. I pressed my head against the door and looked up. 3 craft were descending toward the construction site. 2 of them were smaller. 2 of them were smaller, about the size of one of those recreational vehicles, maybe a little larger. They had a cowled insect-like look. They looked like beetles with twin, long, serrated spears pointed forward on each side. The Andalite had called these ones bug fighters. The 3rd craft was much larger, shaped like an angular battle axe. It was black on black, sharp and deadly looking. As it sank slowly toward us, I felt my fear grow. It was not the cat that was afraid. It was me, the human. The cat didn't know what the ship was. I did. I had seen it before. The Andalite had called it a blade ship. It was the personal ship of Visser 3, and terror seemed to flow from it. I could smell the fear sweat on Chapman. I guess I was glad he was scared too. Maybe Visser 3 would become the Van Arks and suck the Chapman Yeerk out of Chapman's head. Maybe the true Chapman would experience a few seconds of freedom before he was killed. Maybe the Chapman Yeerk would suffer before Visser 3 finished him off. Maybe. Fear is like a worm inside you. It eats you. It chews your guts. It bores holes in your heart. It makes you feel hollow, empty, alone. Fear. The blade ship landed between 2 half-finished buildings. The bug fighters came to a rest on either side of it. They looked so strange, parked between the yellow-painted earth movers and graders in the construction site. The earth movers looked like toys. The alien craft looked like deadly weapons. I was afraid. I tried to borrow the cat's courage, his indifference. But then the door of the blade ship opened. and I had no courage, only fear. Chapter 20. Visser 3 in person is worse than Visser 3 as a hologram. There's nothing horrible about him, not when he's in his normal Andalite body at least. Andalites are strange looking, that's for sure, but they aren't frightening. But I had met a real Andalite. You could feel the difference between a real Andalite and the evil beast that was Visser 3. It was like he glowed with some dark light, a light that cast a shadow over your mind. Visser 3. Even Chapman feared him. Around the Visser, 2 Hork-Bajir guards deployed. Each was holding a Dracon beam. Not that Hork-Bajir ever looked like they needed weapons. They were weapons. Marco had called them walking salad shooters. They were living razor blades. Wickedly curved blades raked forward from their foreheads. More blades were at their elbows and wrists. Their feet were like Tobias's talons, only much bigger, like tyrannosaur feet. They were 7 feet tall, maybe a little more, with a spiked tail. The Andalite had told us that the Hork-Bajir were a good people, enslaved by the Yeerks, just the same way the Yeerks wanted to enslave humans. But it was hard to look at a Hork-Bajir and think that they had ever been anything but killing machines. Behind the Hork-Bajir came 4 taxon. Imagine a centipede. Now imagine a centipede twice the length of a man and just as big around. I think there's a movie about that. Imagine that the centipede. Imagine that the centipede holds the upper third of its body erect. Imagine pointed legs like steel pins below, and smaller legs with little claws as you get closer to the head. Not that it has a real head. There are 4 separate globs that look like chopped up red jello that are the taxon's eyes. And at the very top, a mouth. The mouth is perfectly round and lined with row after row of small needle teeth. The Andalite told us that the taxon are all voluntary hosts. They're allies of the Yeerks. And yet, as horrible as the Hork-Bajir and the taxon were, it was Visser 3 who made your skin crawl. Without the hologram communicator, the Visser communicated in the usual Andalite fashion. He thought spoke, much like we all did when we were in Morph. "That is the Andalite bandit?" he asked Chapman. "Yes, Visser." Visser 3 advanced toward me, almost mincing on his delicate Andalite legs, looking like a cross between a deer, a human, and a scorpion. He aimed his main eyes at me. His stalk eyes scanned the area, always watchful. He brought his face close to the cage. I was staring right into his face. I could see those nose slits open and close as he breathed. I could see the large almond-shaped eyes narrow as he peered inside to get a better look at me. He was only inches away. I should have tried to reach through the bars and at least bloody him a little. But the fear was all over me. I was sick with terror. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I couldn't stand his eyes watching me. I turned away, afraid to look. "Not so brave now, my Andalite friend?" Visser 3 asked. It was the first time any of us had ever been spoken to directly by the Visser. His voice was in my head, threatening and cruel and foul beyond description. It was a voice full of power and hatred. When he called me an Andalite, I almost burst out, "No! No, Visser, not an Andalite. A human! A human!" It was like I could feel the terrible force of his will battering me. In an instant, I knew I would never survive his questioning. I would tell him everything. His power was a million times greater than mine. His will was a vast, huge, irresistible thing. And what was I? Just some foolish little girl. A foolish, lost girl. So lost. And yet, Even as I felt my own mind wither before the black terror of Visser 3, another mind came forward. I was not alone. There was another in my head with me. Someone whose species memory had no images of Visser 3. Fluffer. Fluffer's mind contained fears, but they were different from my fears. Fluffer feared big predator birds. Fluffer feared loud, aggressive dogs. Fluffer feared dominant male cats. But Fluffer was not at all impressed by Visser 3. On the edge of absolute panic, I let the cat in my mind take over. I sank back, hiding behind the calm cat brain. Visser 3 took the cage from Chapman. He lifted it up so he could see inside better. And what did I do? What did Fluffer do? He stuck his little pink nose up against the bars and sniffed at the air. Fluffer wanted to find out what this creature was, and that meant getting a good smell of him. This is similar to the orange and black creature that invaded the pool, Visser 3 said. It took me a second to track on this. Then I realized he meant Jake. Jake had been in his tiger morph when we battled in the Yerk pool. Yes, Visser, Chapman said. They are a family of animals. Felines. These are the smallest. I see you damaged my servant, Innis-226, Andalite, Visser 3 said to me. No one ever accused you Andalites of lacking courage. You are a race of fools, but brave. What was I supposed to say? Thank you? Why not answer me, Andalite? I know you hear my words. This charade is pointless. I know what you are. I said nothing. I tried to think nothing. I was afraid that if I said anything, he would instantly know that I was not an Andalite, and if he ever realized I was human, the others would never be safe again. I had to stay in this body. I had to die in this body, and I had to take my secret with me. Visser 3 put my cage back down. Now, where is the girl? I have promised her to Innis-455. Innis-455 is a spawn mate of yours, I believe. We will do the infestation aboard the mothership, and I will have the girl returned tomorrow. Where is she? Visser, Chapman said. The mask of politeness dropped from Visser 3 in a microsecond. Even my cat eyes could barely follow his movements, they were so swift. Visser 3 grabbed Chapman around the neck. His Andalite tail arched forward. The dagger point of his tail was in Chapman's face. Do you defy me? It was like a hiss. The hiss of a snake. No, Visser. Chapman was shaking like a leaf. I would never defy you. It's only the host, Chapman. He and the woman rebelled. Aren't you able to control your host? Visser 3 sneered. Do you think the Andalite mind that still lives in this body never resists? Do you imagine that your human host is more powerful than my own Andalite host? This wasn't going very well for Chapman. Either the real human Chapman or the human controller that called itself Chapman. Visser, I only report the facts to you. My host is under control, but I am constantly in contact with humans. I occupy a responsible position in their society. I cannot have my host body causing me to twitch and shake. Humans see such things as signs of mental illness. I could lose my position of authority, and I would no longer be of any use to you. You are barely of use to me now, Visser 3 sneered. Visser, my host begs leave to address you directly, Chapman said. Visser 3 hesitated. I saw his stalk eyes scan around, checking for any signs of threat. Instinctively, I looked around too. I had no way of knowing how well Visser 3's borrowed Andalite eyes could see in the dark, but for me, the darkness was no barrier. I looked. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but all I saw were the Hork-Bajir and the Taxons, the Yerk ships, silent and dark, and the buildings of forlorn construction equipment of the site. Then I caught a glimpse of movement. It was in the woods that bordered the construction site. A swift, side-to-side movement. Just the sort of thing my cat eyes notice best. But when I stared closer, I saw no further movement. Probably just another Hork-Bajir patrolling. I will allow the host to address me, Visser 3 said. I craned my head up as well as I could to watch. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, suddenly, Chapman sagged. It was like he was a marionette and someone had cut his strings. He collapsed, straight down. His legs just twisted up under him. He tried to stand up, but it was as if he didn't know how to make his legs work. They would jerk and suddenly kick out, but he could not stand. Finally, he gave up. Fisher, he mumbled. Fisher free, sorry. Fisher, Visser 3. The real, human Chapman had been out of control of his own body for so long, he no longer remembered how to move it or to speak. Visser 3, he said again. His voice was slurry and strange. Speak, you fool, Visser 3 snapped. Do you think I can stay here forever? Visser 3, we had a deal. You know I never wanted to join you. My wife did, but I said no. But then my wife, no longer my wife by then, of course. Suddenly, he began to cry. I could see his tears very clearly. My wife, who was no longer my wife, who was one of your creatures, threatened to give you my daughter. Chapman managed to raise one clumsy hand to his eyes. I forgive her. She was weak, and you feed on weakness. Yes, I do. Yes, get to the point, Visser 3 said. A Hork-Bajir moved closer. He muttered something to the Visser, then moved away. I couldn't hear or understand what the Hork-Bajir had said, but it looked as if he was reminding Visser 3 that they shouldn't hang around too long. The point is, Chapman said, that I agreed to be made into a host. I agreed to he looked like he was about to throw up. I agreed to surrender my freedom, to become a controller, to accept this filthy thing in my head, to accept your control. I agreed, but only if you would spare my daughter. It felt like my heart had stopped beating. Chapman had become a controller to save Melissa. He had given more than his life to save his daughter. The situation has changed, Visser 3 said. The Chapman person is an important part of our work. We cannot have him endangered by some uncontrollable human. The girl, Melissa, is no threat, but Chapman struggled to lift himself up once again. With clumsy legs and awkward arms, he rose to his knees. Then slowly, he stood up. He was wobbling and swaying, but he was standing. The girl is no threat, he repeated in a stronger, more confident voice. But I am. That is just over the hour mark, but I think, there is very little left. So I am just going to push through. Chapter 21. You a threat? Visser 3 laughed. He reached out with one hand to push lightly on Chapman's chest. Chapman fell back, sprawled out on the dirt. His head was just inches from the door of my cage. Tears were streaming down the side of his face. If you harm my daughter, I will fight you. I will fight you forever. Ask your Yerk if he believes me. He knows better than anyone. Ask Innis 226 if I will fight for my daughter. Chapman closed his eyes. The tears stopped. Then his eyes opened again. He picked himself up quickly from the ground and stood before Visser 3. The Yerk slug was in charge again. He was once again a controller. Before he stood, I saw something that frightened me all over again. It was Chapman's watch. The time was now 9:28. I had 17 minutes before I hit the 2-hour limit. The host will attempt to disrupt you. Yes, Visser. And the woman as well. She is not as strong as this one, but she was... Yes, Visser, and the woman as well. She is not as strong as this one, but she was able to gain control of one hand. Perhaps she has deeper strength than we knew. He hesitated before going on. I could still smell the fear on him. I am of more use with a passive voluntary host, but I am your tool, Visser. I will do as you command. Yes, you certainly will do as I command, Visser 3 said. But you have brought me the Andalite bandit, he nodded down at me. And this will occupy my time for a little while. Leave the girl, for now. Now get out. You tempt my patience. Chapman didn't need a second invitation. He jumped in the car and tore out of there. Melissa was safe. As safe as she would ever be with Chapman as her father. That was something. Not much, but something. Move out, Visser 3 yelled. I saw the Hork-Bajir respond instantly to his command. The nearest one snatched me up, and suddenly we were moving fast toward the blade ship. In seconds, it would all be over. I would be aboard the Visser's ship. I would leave Earth. The only thing in my future was pain. Maybe I would die before I betrayed my friends. A depressing kind of thing to hope for. So, what's happening now? Wow! I jumped and spun around inside my cage. Jake, is that you? Who else would it be? You know anyone else who would be a talking flea riding on your back? Jake, you were supposed to get away and be safe. Yeah, right. Like I was going to abandon you. Listen, I could hear Visser 3's thought speech, but I don't know where we are now. We are about 10 feet away from being loaded into Visser 3's blade ship. And I have about 15 minutes left before I'm trapped in this morph. 15 minutes? Great. If you have 15, I have 10. I had to morph earlier than you, remember? Jake, get out of here. You can't be trapped as a flea. The door of the blade ship slid open silently. I could see dark red light inside. I could see a handful of taxon that seemed to be standing over control panels of some sort. Hork-Bajir stood at attention. I'm not getting out of here, Jake said. Oh, sorry. I'm not getting out of here, Jake said. None of us are. None of... You mean the rest of you are fleas too? No, but they should be around here somewhere. Tobias was supposed to follow us and lead the others to wherever we ended up. They can't do anything. Oh, really? Well, I bet they'll try. Just at that moment, I heard a strange sound. My cat brain didn't recognize it, but the human me did. It was an engine, a big engine, like a big truck, or maybe a tractor, or an earth mover. The Hork-Bajir carrying me saw it too. He ran into the blade ship and tossed me down. Then he ran back to the Visser, who waited in the doorway. I think they've started one of the Earth. Sorry. I think they've started one of the Earth movers, I told Jake. Then I guess it's time for me to get into this fight, Jake said. I'm going to try a quick double morph. Hope it works. Here goes nothing. Yeehaw! All at once, through the open door of the blade ship, I spotted the Earth mover. It lumbered at a painfully slow speed, but it lumbered right toward the blade ship. Get us into the air, Visser 3 shouted. The nearest taxon said something in their slithery snake speech. It sounded like 2 minutes to lift off is too long, Visser 3 said. His tail whipped forward. I saw a huge gash open in the flesh of the taxon. Greenish yellow goo poured out. The other taxon all looked kind of excited. They were waving their little upper arms and snapping their little claws. You and you, Visser 3 pointed out two of the taxon. Get us off the ground. The rest of you may feed on this fool. The wounded taxon emitted a wailing, slithery scream. Three other taxon rushed him. Their circular mouths fastened onto their fellow taxon's writhing flesh and began chewing and tearing at him. The sound of the diesel engine grew louder. Visser 3 was rapping out orders. Hork-Bajir ran through the... Goodness, boys. Very soon. The sound of the diesel engine grew louder. Visser 3 was rapping out orders. Hork-Bajir ran through the door and back outside again. Then I saw something happening in the dark corner of the cabin, over past the horrific taxon feeding frenzy. Something was growing. A human being was growing out of nothing. Jake! Can't talk. Don't distract me. Visser 3 was in a rage. You could feel the waves of his anger radiating around the small space. Destroy that machine, he ordered. Outside, two Hork-Bajir took aim at the 5 tons of slow-moving steel. Jake was still cowering in the corner, but he had begun to change once again. In the darkness, my cat eyes could see the beginning of a pattern of stripes, black and orange, the stripes of a tiger. It was time for me to do my part. I concentrated. I felt the change begin. The cage grew small around me. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth mover closed in. The near-dead taxon screamed as his fellow taxon ate him alive. Suddenly, I saw a brilliant red light. There was a sizzling sound. I saw the earth mover disintegrate. My heart was in my throat. Marco? Cassie? Had they gotten away? I had to concentrate. I had to ignore the taxon screams. I had to stop wondering whether Cassie and Marco had been on that earth mover when it was hit. I had to control my morph. Not too far, Rachel. Sorry. Not too far, Rachel. Not too much. I could not become human. Not totally human. I looked down at my paw. Short, stubby fingers had appeared. I stuck my stubby, half-human fingers through the bars of the cage and found the lock. One of the feeding taxon looked away from his meal just long enough. Yes, sir. It waved its creepy front legs in my direction. Visser 3 snapped around and glared at me with ferocious hatred. I opened the door of my cage. Sorry, let me try roaring again. Jake leapt through the air, his huge claws outstretched. I flew out of the cage, a clumsy mass of fur and skin, a creature that was half cat and half human. Jake hit Visser 3 in the side. This time you're mine, you jerk. Visser 3 fell over, tangled up in a tiger. His deadly tail flashed but missed. Jake ripped up the Visser's flesh with claws infinitely bigger than mine. Infinitely bigger paws. Arrgh! It was a great pleasure hearing Visser 3 scream that way, but I had other things to worry about. I couldn't move in my half-morph. I concentrated on regaining my cat form. I had only minutes left before the 2 hours would be up. Jake rolled off of Visser 3 just as a handful of Hork-Bajir rushed into the Visser's defense. "Run!" Jake yelled. "Run!" I agreed. We ran. I was back fully in Fluffer's shape. I could do 30 miles an hour, as fast as the fastest human being could run. Unfortunately, Hork-Bajir can run faster. Jake was faster still, for short distances, fast enough to outrun the Hork-Bajir that were after us, but he wasn't going to leave me behind. Jake turned and came back for the closest Hork-Bajir. I saw him flying over my head, a huge beast, orange and black striped. The Hork-Bajir went down hard. "Get out of here, Rachel! You're too small to fight these guys." But there was still another Hork-Bajir on my tail, faster than me. Too fast. I dodged left. The Hork-Bajir shot past me. I turned back sharply, my little pad scrabbling in the dirt. The Hork-Bajir grabbed for me, but missed. Something else was moving. Something big. The ground was rumbling. A second earth mover was grinding forward on its tank treads. Marco and Cassie had started another one. I raced toward the nearest half-finished building. I had to get away, and I had to morph back. Time was up. In minutes, I would be trapped. I saw a dark hole. I flew toward it in a single leap. The hole led under a wall. Then it opened into a shallow basement. There was a concrete floor about 2 feet over my head, but I was safe, and with room enough to morph back to my human shape. I tried to concentrate. Out beyond my little concrete shelter, I heard growls and alien cries. I heard the rumble of the earth mover. I thought I heard the sizzle of Dracon beams. Human, I told myself. Return to human. Only minutes left. Then I felt a shattering noise. Then another. Another. It was like some giant was stomping around. The giant steps stopped. I was frozen, unable to even think, let alone morph. Crash! All around me, pillars of rock-hard... Pardon me? All around me, pillars of rock-hard, scaled flesh, each as big around as a tree trunk, ripped into the concrete. Crunch! The concrete was lifted off me, torn away like it was paper. I was exposed, trapped, and standing over me with the shattered concrete floor in its mighty hand was a beast that seemed to be made of living rock. "You won't get away so easily," Visser 3 said. Chapter 22. It was all over. I knew I was done for. Nothing in the world could stop the beast Visser 3 had morphed into. He was 20 feet tall as a telephone pole. He stood on 3 massive legs, each as big around as a redwood tree. He had a tiny head, not much bigger than a human head. He would have looked funny, except that there was nothing funny about what he was doing. With 2 long, mighty arms, he was casually tearing up the concrete. He slammed his fingers into the cement. He ripped it up in slabs and tossed them over his shoulder. One of the slabs hit a Hork-Bajir, and it crushed him. I don't think Visser 3 even noticed or cared. I ran. Crash! One of the Visser's huge hands slammed down in front of me. I scampered back and turned. Crash! Another hand, like living rock, slammed in front of me. Even the cat in me knew it was hopeless. Visser 3 glared down at me with tiny, bright eyes and that weirdly small head. He reached for me with both hands, cupped together, forming a wall around me. Crunch! Visser 3 hesitated. Boom! I bolted. I leapt to the top of a wall. I leapt to the top of a wall, 6 feet straight up, and trust me, as scared as I was, I could have jumped even higher. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw what had happened. The earth mover had ground forward and slammed into one of the bug fighters. The bug fighter had exploded. Visser 3 roared in fury. I did not envy the Hork-Bajir and Taxon who had let the earth mover get through to it. I ran along the top of the wall. It was cinder block, full of holes and only a few inches wide. It was a much tougher challenge than the balance beam in gymnastics. But I was running as fast as a very scared kitty can run. I'll kill you all, fools! Visser 3 screamed. I hoped he would just forget about me, but then I heard the thunder of his walk. In 2 steps he had caught up to me. His huge hand swept toward me. It was 10 feet to the ground, and the ground was covered with rusted, twisted metal. I had no choice. I leapt. The sharp metal was rushing up at me. The sharp metal was rushing up at me. Visser's hand was sweeping toward me. Something sharp bit into my back. The ground was no longer rushing up at me. Instead, I was zooming through the air. Geez, Rachel, next time you want to morph into a kitty, pick one who doesn't eat so much. Tobias. I can get you as far as the trees. That's it, Tobias said. I have to morph back, I said. My time is up. We flew toward the trees. Tobias strained to keep us in the air. I knew he was at his limit of endurance. Drop me, now! We were in the trees. Tobias dropped me. I fell through the air, but my tail pivoted and kept my balance perfect. A tree branch, slam! My claws dug into the bark. I was already morphing back as I dropped to the ground and landed on soft pine needles. Through the trees, I could see the huge beast that was Visser 3 rampaging in a fury. The few Hork-Bajir that were left were tossed around like toys. Taxon were crushed under his feet. I think he's mad we got away, Tobias said. Jake? The others? I demanded. Did they make it? They're fine. Jake had to morph back into human shape before going into the tiger morph, so he didn't have a problem with the time. Marco got his feathers a little singed, but he's okay. Cassie too. I collapsed on the ground. I had escaped. I had survived. I knew I should have been glad, but all I felt was tired. So that's real. Final chapter. Chapter 23. Melissa was at our next gymnastics class. She was still alive, still free. I acted nonchalant as I changed into my leotard and stretched out, but I did watch when she opened her locker and pulled out the envelope. She opened it and read the words I had put there. Melissa, your father loves you more than you will ever know, and more than he can ever show you. I had signed it, Someone Who Knows. I'd printed it out on a word processor, of course, so she wouldn't recognize my handwriting. Maybe it was just my imagination, but she seemed more into practice that day. After my mom picked me up and drove me home, I hooked up with the others. We hadn't gotten together for a couple of days, since the battle at the construction site. I guess I felt like I had some things to think about. "How is Melissa?" Cassie asked. I shrugged. I left her a note. I told them what it had said. "I know it's bad for security, Jake. And Marco, I know it was sentimental, but I don't care." Chapman gave up everything to save his daughter from being made into a host. I had to do something. Jake nodded. "It's okay. Maybe it will help." Cassie smiled at me, telling me she was proud of what I'd done. Marco rolled his eyes, but he didn't say anything. "Well, we destroyed a Yerk bug fighter. We made Visser 3 nervous. And we came out alive," Marco finished. "Yeah, that too," Jake agreed with a grin. "That is a very important thing to have done." "Next time, I began. "Next time?" Sorry. "Next time?" Marco cried out in mock horror. "There will be a next time," Tobias said. There will be a next time until the Andalites return. The end. Thank you so much for joining me, and sorry, I do apologize if I kept Emma awake a bit past her bedtime tonight, but I will check back and may continue on to the third book if there is still any interest in continuing. Thank you. Good night.